Hey everyone, Dark Magician of Team Sorcerers here, and welcome back to What If Wednesday. Yeah, as you can tell, I'm filming these back to back. And it's another Robot Wars one. I've yet to think of some other Yu-Gi-Oh! Ones at the time of recording. But this is one that was covered on a forum. I forget which one it was. But this one's about Tornado and Dominator 2 in the 6th floors. Now obviously, as you saw, Tornado ran into Matilda's flywheel tail and was sent flying, and it almost landed in the pit, but Dominator 2 accidentally drove in there. But this brings me to the point, what if Tornado actually did land in the pit? Well, this would obviously change a lot. Dominator 2 would go through to the grand final instead, and Tornado wouldn't become the Series 6 champion. Now on this forum, the guy said that Dominator 2 would fight Razor and Firestorm would fight Terahertz, and then have a certain layout in Series 7, which I'm not, but these are things I'm not too sure I'd agree on, because normally with grand finals, like in the case of Series 4, 5 and 6 at least, they'd have the highest ranked robot go up against the lowest one, and have the other two face off. Plus, I generally try to follow the real timeline as much as possible for the sake of simplicity. So, in this case, Razor would still fight Terahertz and beat it, which would mean there would in fact be a rematch and grudge match between Firestorm and Dominator 2. And like I said in an earlier video, Firestorm 4 would easily beat Dominator 2, especially since it's thicker than Firestorm 2's armour. So Dominator 2 would be eliminated. Firestorm would go on to the grand final. And in the playoff it would be a clash of the axes. And Terahertz would start off quite well. Dominator 2 would land a few axe blows, or either that or keep missing, or both. There's not much for Terahertz to really hit. I mean, if it's lucky it could hit Dominator 2's axe. Whether or not it would be able to break it off, I'm not sure, but not that it matters, because Terahertz, of course, would end up breaking down after suffering from Razor. So, yeah, Terahertz would break down and Dominator 2 would finish third. And then, of course, Razor and Firestorm would meet in the grand final, and like I said before, it would play out the same way as the second All-Stars final. So Razor would in fact keep the title. And even though it would face Tornado in the European Championship, that fight would simply play out the same way as the real Series 6 Grand Final in the real timeline, but it wouldn't stop Razor entering Series 7. Now, I'm not going to go over this again, because I already went over this scenario before. But yeah, it would only just result in Typhoon 2 basically winning again. Regardless of how Razor would probably do against Storm 2. Maybe, depending. I don't know. So, yeah, with Tornado eliminated, Razor would keep the title and again be the second robot to maintain the UK title. But let's say, for the sake of argument, that Razor did get pitted against Dominator 2 in the grand final eliminator, and Firestorm got pitted against Terahertz. It was mentioned that Razor wouldn't be able to do much to Dominator 2, and Dominator 2 would get some easy hits with the axe, and maybe even break the self-righting mechanism. Now this I do agree with. Now I did cover this fight before, a while ago actually, but I do agree that in that scenario Dominator 2 would beat Razor on a judge's decision. Meanwhile, a healthy Terahertz would just batter Firestorm and just leave it unable to move freely. So the grand final match would be a clash of the axes, while Razor would beat Firestorm in the playoff. Now this guy did mention that in a clash of the axes, Dominator 2 would beat Terahertz on the judge's decision. I guess it would, because I feel like Dominator 2 would be more controlled. Although, again, I don't know whether or not Terahertz would be able to break off Dominator 2's axe. I know Terahertz can't damage Dominator 2 otherwise, but Dominator 2 would get some more controlled attacks in. Although it's hard to say whether or not it would bounce off the polycarbonate armour or go straight through it. I guess both would be aggressive. Dominator 2 would technically be able to do more damage, but Dominator 2 would be more controlled, so I guess Dominator 2 would win on a judge's decision. And then, of course, it was also mentioned about an awkward situation. Now, Dominator 2, of course, was originally going to be in Series 7, but then at the last minute it had engine problems and then had to pull out, whereas Terahertz wasn't fully built in time and yet was still entered and seeded for the 7th Wars, but was just automatically eliminated. So either way, it would be the first time that a champion doesn't return to reclaim the title. Well, unless of course you count the gap between Series 7 and 8, where for the reboot series Typhoon 2 didn't return. But yeah, other than that, Dominator 2 wouldn't come back, and because of the situation with Terahertz, it wouldn't make sense to make it the #1 seed, Um, and have all that hype only for it to pull out. And this person did mention that by default, Razor would be seeded number 1. Again, and I guess Bigger Brother would be 3rd, and Tornado would be 4th, and I guess everyone would remain the same. But yeah, with Terahertz not here, this is easy to figure out because Razor would just take its spot. And would fight Killer Cat, Jackson Wallop, and Gyrobot instead. And I feel like would be able to win the heat in that scenario. Yeah, it can easily beat Grim Reaper, and I feel like would be able to beat Big Nipper still, despite Big Nipper improving. And then it would go on to fight Storm 2 in semi-final 2. Unless both semi-finals are swapped over, since Razor is the number 1 seed. Doesn't matter either way, but yeah, there is debate about whether or not who would win between Razor and Storm 2. But yeah, if Storm 2 does win, then the rest of the series plays out the same way as in the real timeline. So that's easy to figure out, and Typhoon 2 ends up winning still. But if Razor wins, then it would fight either Atomic or Typhoon 2. Because it wouldn't make sense for the top 2 seeds to face off against each other. Or would they be in separate semi-finals? Because they usually keep the 1st seed and the 2nd seed in separate semi-finals. But yeah, we'll stick with this for the moment, for the sake of simplicity. I know either of them... Wait, I was going to say either of them would beat Atomic, but I feel like Atomic could probably beat Firestorm 5 quite easily. So I don't know. If Razor fights Typhoon 2, Typhoon 2 would win. If Atomic fights Firestorm, Atomic is more likely to win. Now, in the grand final, Typhoon 2 would still get pitted against Exterminator for the sake of simplicity and beat it. But I don't know who'd win between Atomic and Tornado. Again, this would be a tricky one to figure out. I know if Atomic wins, the playoff plays out the same way, and then the fight between Typhoon 2 and Atomic would also play out the same way, with Typhoon 2 still winning. But if Tornado wins, Atomic would beat Exterminator in the playoff. But it's hard to say who'd win between Typhoon 2 and Tornado. I feel like I might have covered this before, I'm not sure. I guess Typhoon 2 probably would, purely because Tornado isn't as powerful as Storm 2 and has weaker armour, although Tornado is easier to control. But it's really hard to say in that scenario. But yeah, if Razor and Firestorm were kept separate from their semi-final fights, this is even harder to figure out because I don't know which fight to swap them over with. I don't know, but whatever the scenario, either Typhoon 2, Storm 2, or Tornado would win, depending. Oh wait, I didn't cover the other scenario where Razor would fight Atomic, and Firestorm would fight Typhoon 2. Razor would definitely beat Atomic, and Firestorm, I feel like, could beat Typhoon 2. Which puts the grand final a bit up in the air, because we'd have Razor, Firestorm, Tornado, and Exterminator. I know Razor would beat Exterminator, and I guess because Firestorm and Tornado didn't fight each other in the 6 wars in this timeline, that would play out the same way. So Tornado would win, and then Firestorm would beat Exterminator in the playoff. And then the grand final fight would be the same as the Series 6 one, only I don't know whether or not the big frame would be allowed at this point. Because it would have been only used once in the European Championship in this timeline. Then again, because I've overlooked something, with Tornado not winning, would the active weapon rule thing still be applied? That's something that's a bit up in the air. If it is, then Stinger still wouldn't be allowed to enter, but if it is, then but if no such rule is enforced, then Stinger would be allowed to enter and would have been seeded. Where it would have been seeded, I'm not sure. Well, that kind of complicated things a bit. I'll get back to that in a minute. But yeah, if the frame is allowed, Tornado would win the 7th ward. But if it's not allowed, then Tornado stands no chance, and Razor would win the title for a 3rd time in a row. But where would Stinger be seeded? I guess that would mean that Ming Dynasty wouldn't be seeded. I reckon Stinger would be seeded higher than Behemoth, but I feel like it would just lose to Saint Aggro in its heat anyway, because it would take Ming's spot, I feel like. Yeah, sorry, this got a bit confusing and complicated, and it was meant to be a nice short episode. yeah, in all honesty, that's basically what would happen if Tornado crash dived into the pit after being hit by Matilda, and Dominator 2 made it to the grand final instead. One way or another, Razor would win the 6 floors, and depending on certain matchups, either Typhoon 2 would still win, or Tornado would if the active weapon rule didn't happen, or Razor would win it a third time in a row. But, yeah, that's it for this one. Thanks for watching.